So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the last and final live session of the course Learning and Development. I'm happy to see that you are progressing to the fag end of this particular course, and it is great to note that with the feedbacks that I'm receiving that there is a lot of learning that has gone to you, and you are enjoying the course on a day-to-day basis and getting good feedback, and that is motivating, that is encouraging. As usual, as I start any live session, I would like to reiterate that please note that most of the questions that come to me is starting with the confusion that should I be worried about some missed out assignments. Please do not worry that much. Of course, I reiterate that assignments do have a certain value. They have a certain percentage of marks that's associated and will be calculated to your final result. But that said, that is not the only decision maker. There are other parameters, including the final exam. So try to focus well, try to learn well, try to improve, and try to cover up all the portions which we have categorically covered. This will ensure that you have a good command over the subject learning and development, and will certainly fetch you more marks than you actually think. So this is something I wanted to mention in the beginning itself. That said, if you have any questions at any point in time, please feel free to stop me. So there were a couple of queries that asked with respect to a summarization. So, I will just quickly summarize what we had done throughout the course. And in between, you have some questions, please, do not worry, do not hesitate from asking that. So learning and development, as you know, the need was to address a critical vertical in the human resource management domain that is significant and that is very much relevant in a present day scenario, especially when you're looking into, attrition that is happening at a higher rate. Organizations which otherwise were known as the key factor, like key organizations that once people get in, they don't want to go out, or they were the reliable, trustworthy employer, has or is certainly losing its sheen and its the glamour. So this is where learning and development becomes essential, not only from the employee point of view, but also from the employer point of view, where the employer is also understanding the need for looking into the TNA, the training need analysis, coming up with what the employee wants, what would be the different parameters that will make him or her stay in my organization, what would be the different aspects which I can give over and above the regular salary or the benefits or the incentives that will make him stay and stick to the organization. So this is something which underscores the relevance of typically the learning and development domain altogether. So this was the context, this was the background why I thought that we should float a course on this learning and development, and the very good registration numbers and as well as the feedback and the response to this course is categorically emphasizing that yes, I have done justice, and it's really encouraging to know that. So in this particular course, we started with an introduction, a sort of a primer towards learning and development in the first module, where we tend to typically start defining learning and development specifically. So we started from the basics, what is critical, what is relevant with respect to learning and development. We looked into the presence of individual in an organization, the need for learning, the need for development, the need for emerging developments, typically within the organization. So here we looked into those parameters, including, career succession, including who will be the next rung of leaders, who will be the next set of organizers or managers in the industry. All these parameters were categorically looked into. So this set the background for learning and development, typically module 1. Module 2 was an extension of this, where we looked more into the personal performance of individuals, typically what an employee is doing, how his individual performance is, or can be augmented at a certain rate if possible. And we also looked into the context. We tried to establish the context of learning and development from this understanding. So this is what typically we have. And we also tend to, think about the future by summarizing what should come in the future with respect to learning and development. In the third module, specifically, we looked into what is the business landscape, what is the business environment today, how learning and development is restructuring the business landscape in today's world. So this was specifically, and this we have taken in the background of the emerging technologies, including AI, and we looked into aspects of human resource management strategy. I tried to, emphasize on some models, some concepts. We integrated this into 2 sessions, typically lecture 2 and lecture 3 of module 3, specifically looked into these 2 parts. Then we addressed the context based on the international platform, that is international human resource development. And we also try to address and look into the stakeholders per se. So these were some of the typical aspects which we looked in module 3. Module 4 was more about an organization, a shift from individual to organization, where we looked into the 3 pillars of organization. Specifically, we looked into the vision, mission, and objectives. We looked into what makes the organization capable, the typical organizational capabilities. We looked into specific organizations terming themselves as learning organization, and some organizations actually terming themselves as high performance or high performing organizations. We looked into the typical aspects which qualify or make these organizations qualify as learning organizations or high performing organizations. So this gave us an idea how we have to look into or approach learning and development. And we concluded, if you remember, the module 4 with the challenges in the L&D function. So this was the map where we tried to underscore what is the transition from organization to from individual to organization, and how we can actually get through a proper outcome with respect to that. In module 5, we tried to start looking into the practical applications, like how learning and development typically works, what is the relevance of that. We tried to deal it with in 2 parts, part 1, part 2, in module 5, the first 2 lectures. Then we started again looking back into the individual. What are the typical individual differences that come or emerge in learning? We try to address that in module 3 specifically. In module 5, lecture 3 specifically, sorry. Then we look into the L&D needs, how to actually understand, how to actually learn, how to actually diagnose the learning and development needs. So this was looked into from a theoretical framework as well as the practitioner's point of view. So if you look into the last lecture of the 5th module, we tried to end it with the practitioner's viewpoint. This is what made the module 5 specifically. Module 6, we looked into the learning and development interventions specifically, where you have to have an intervention as an organization, maybe as a team, as a group, as an individual. All these parameters were considered in module 6, where we also try to look into knowledge management as the second lecture in the module 6. So we try to understand the components of knowledge management, what are the typical individual behaviors associated with knowledge transfer. We also try to bring in the relevance of knowledge sharing and how knowledge hiding is relevant in the organization. We also try to look into the typical knowledge management strategies, knowledge management theories with respect to or vis-a-vis learning and development. So this was what made the first part of the course more critical. That is that we tried to understand the practicality of learning and development with respect to knowledge management. So Nilanjan, you have any question? I see some movement with respect to the voice. Otherwise, we continue. We look into typically the 7th module, where we start with, the learning and development psychological contract that is associated with all the L&D functions, L&D aspects. So we look into the theory behind that. What is psychological contract? What are the theories? Mapping those external factors, messages, social cues, etc., that are associated with this. We also will look into encoding, we'll look into decoding in the individual predispositions, and we looked into the managing part of groups. So how we can see groups, how we can develop groups, how we can manage the group development. All these parameters were typically looked into in the 7th module specifically. So when you move from the 6th module to 7th module, you see that there is a transition whereby we are not moving, whereby we are not restricting ourselves to only describing the phenomenon. We are moving now to the analysis part. We are looking into the intervention part, whereby an organization is coming into picture and the interventions that organization can make at each level, each unit of analysis and research, or at each level can be underscored. So this is what we typically looked into it from the module 7 point of view. In module 8, we looked into the theory part specifically, where we tried to look into the need, the identification of the need, the training need identification, one of the most significant aspects, and how these aspects or these factors in the discipline are disseminated. We also try to understand the typical, approaches of learning and development. We emphasized on the case study method, if you remember, how to make a case, how to go about with the case, and how it has become popular, especially in the B schools across the world. And we also looked into sourcing interventions and how to actually measure or evaluating the typical diagnostic questionnaires. That was what was relevant or what was critical with respect to the learning and development part. In the 9th module, we moved to the planning and action segment, whereby we try to understand what are the typical roles and responsibilities of learning and development. So mainly this happens when you tend to work as a HR manager and you are forced to be part of L&D vertical. Then your contribution is mainly again with just running some typical training programs, or not going into the deeper aspect of understanding the need, understanding the training need, or making an analysis of that TNA and doing it and undertaking the response towards that or intervention towards that. So this module marked a significant difference from, rather than theorizing and moving more into the planning and action, understanding the roles and responsibilities for L&D and the typical sources of expertise. So we tried to have I think in lecture 4 of module 9 discussion on blended learning. We tried to use some sample interventions also with respect to this particular module. In module 10, we looked into the technological advances in learning interventions, where we tried to understand new skills and behaviors specifically. We then started to look into the hierarchy. The senior managers, typically the diagnostic questionnaires that are associated with senior managers, we try to deal with in two different parts, part one, part two, if you've gone through. So most of these lectures you would have already covered. That's why I'm going a bit fast here. So you'll see that in module 10, specifically lecture 3 and lecture 4, explicitly would have been looked into the diagnostic questionnaire specifically in two parts for the senior manager. So then we looked into the conclusion part, where diagnostic questionnaires for learning interventions were underscored in module 10. In module 11, we looked into evaluating learning and development. We again tried to look into this from two parts, learning and development, evaluating that part 1, part 2, models of evaluation, specifically evaluation of coaching, and utility of learning and development interventions specifically. And finally, in module 12, we look into the L&D ongoing trends and approaches. We try to understand technology, learning and development in two different parts. And we also look into the specific tools and techniques. So if you are going through the module 11 and specifically module 12, you'll see that a lot of practical tools which we were, which are there existing in the industry vis-a-vis the learning and development, were tried to look into, or we were discussing that from a learning point of view. And we also looked into typically the L&D's impact on organizational results specific. So if you see the module 12, I have added some content specific to the practical applications that is happening with respect to the organization, the learning and development in organization, some tools that are being used for that. And we also look into some of the critical aspects that emerge as challenges. And module 12 becomes an extension, a practical extension of what we had discussed over the first 10 modules, and typically the background starting from module 11 and culminating in module 12. We'll see that most of the practical tools that are relevant in today's day in the industry were specifically discussed. So these are some of the factors that we had discussed over the period in 12 modules. Over almost some different lecturers, we tried to cover this particular agenda. So I'm happy to see that most of you have a very creative and productive analysis about the course, and it's good to note that learning and development has definitely made a mark in the human resource development domain. So these were some of the possible questions. There was a typical question that asked about summarizing the course. So I've done it for you in a very quick, 15-20 minutes. So this is what I wanted to have a discussion on. If you have any particular doubts, please do ask. I can also look into the YouTube if there are any particular doubt. Please let me know, please ask. We can have a discussion. As far as I know, I can clarify that. See, there were some discussions in the previous session, if you remember, with respect to the TNA, the training need analysis. So please note, we have discussed this in detail in module 10, specifically lecture 2, where we were looking into the TNA, training need analysis. And this is nothing but identifying the gaps between the current and the desired performance. So let's say you see some lacunae, you see some problems with respect to the performance, some impediments that are there that has to be rectified, some gaps that have to be plugged. You'll definitely have to impart these employees certain training. Now, what is it? How much is it? What is the intensity to which you have to deliver? All these aspects typically, gets communicated with respect to your potential to impart the learning in the organization, and also the possible learning and development scenario in the organization, whether you are working in an organization with a growth mindset. And also we'll look into certain aspects where, there are typical, situations of, learning and development initiatives that a company or that an organization takes up. So these are some of the possible aspects. But along with TNA, if you recollect, I'd also, looked into the performance gap analysis, the capability assessment. I hope you can hear me. There was a small technical glitch. Sorry for the interruption, and we are back. So we had a small, discussion about. Typically, there was a small glitch. Yeah, so I think now it should be working, right? So, and if you can confirm, then it would be better. But I think it's working well now. So, typically, learning and development, we have given a small narrative, a small summary about the things, and we are trying to look into that from a critical, point of view of organization specific learning. So how a learning organization will work and how it will be typically, important. So this is what we understand with respect to learning and development. If you have any particular specific question, you are free to ask. With respect to the end term exam, I will say that the exams would be following a similar pattern of the assignments. So that would be what I can say. It will be having multiple select as well as multiple choice questions. So this is typically the pattern of the end term exam. Some of you had asked me that. And again, please prepare well. As a suggestion, I would say that what all things we had covered, what all things we have discussed in the class, you should be thorough about that. You should be aware of that. And over and above that, I would certainly, ask you to read more from the textbook. That would definitely enhance your understanding of the topic, and will also try to look into things from a more critical perspective. So this is what I wanted to actually, give you a small insight into learning and development typically. And this is what, generally comes into my mind when I talk about learning and development. So any other questions? I am open to it. So please let me know. I'll just give you another, 5 minutes. Let's have a discussion. Let's see whether there are questions coming in. Then I can actually look into that. Yeah, I think again, sorry for that. There was another, power shutdown. So I hope now it's audible and visible. On that, confidence, I'm moving ahead. So we had a brief discussion with respect to what is typically, learning and development, and what it is, what we have covered with respect to this course specifically. And there was one typical question that I came across in the YouTube by Vasant Lakshmi. Changes in TNA, what are the present assessment patterns in learning and development? So if you look into the situation currently, the current scenario, it is more of reactive to proactive. So we talk about more about data-driven decisions specifically. We talk about employee-centric approach, and we generally look into competence-based analysis. So specifically, that is what we are typically concerned when we look into the changes. So present pattern for assessment, if you ask me, it's centered around blended methods. It could be a survey, it could be 360-degree, it could be interview. So it's blended around it's moving around the blended methods where we try to bring in more than one. We also have some real-time tracking, LMS, LXP, all of these things which we have categorically discussed during our sessions. We also conduct some competency mapping, and we also look into micro assessment, and thanks to all the gamified and engagement tools. These are some of the ways in which we try to go ahead with the pattern or with the assessment as a pattern in today's world. So this is what I wanted to answer to your question, Vasant Lakshmi. And yeah, Bekumar, namaste. So Nilanjan has a question. So when identifying successors, should we focus more on current competence of or future capability, and how do we differentiate between the two? So typically, I would say that you have to look into the current competence, but also look into the organizational situation at the moment. What is your organization warranting, or what is your organization calling for, demanding? This clarity should be there with you when you are taking in a person or an entity. So when you are looking into the organization, whether he or she as an employee is going to come and contribute or will again extend as another dead rubber, this is something which you have to be very much aware of. This clarity would certainly bring some understanding, whereby you will see that people are more concerned with the organization specifically. So the focus should be on current competency. The organization should also focus on the future of the organization. But that said, for the sake of a recruitment or for the sake of a selection process, please don't do that. Let the correct people come into the system. Be transparent, be open. Many a time we tend to look into situations whereby we think that we have to keep secrecy, and then we have to or my typical position actually warns that these are all parameters of knowledge hiding. As a researcher in knowledge hiding, I can categorically state it. These are all parameters of knowledge hiding, whereby you are trying to impart some counterproductive organizational behaviors. And this is the reality. This is the fact. So it's all about, typically what you should look into. So if your question is more about the data point should be used, I would definitely say, let's say, look into the previous record, the experience. It might be, in terms of an expertise in a particular tool, in a particular platform, in a particular domain. That should be the benchmark. Based on that, you can definitely have an analysis whether this person going ahead is going to actually be an asset or liability for the organization. So that is something which is critically that should go into your mind, and you should be aware of this. Kindly conduct a marathon revision that was conducted in AI HRM, the 9-to-5 examination. So typically, what I understand is if The AI HRM course will be floated in the next semester. But what I have essentially done is a typical fast revision at the point, and I hope that's what you are asking, Kunjay. Okay. One course. AI, okay, all right, okay. So that typically with respect to the AI in HRM, this is specifically what we have done with respect to that. So that's why I have dedicated this live session for that, whereby you are looked into the essential aspects which have been delivered there, right? So I hope that's clear, Abhay. You can go from the beginning if you were absent in this particular session. I've essentially tried to look into that. So any more questions? I don't see any particular question right now. If there are any more questions, you can always shoot. Okay. If there are no more questions, we'll try to wind it up. A big word of thank you to all the stakeholders who worked behind the scenes to make this course possible. That will include my, TAs. That will include all the people who have worked with respect to generating, meaningful and relevant and impactful essential content, and also to bring in a lot of relevant cases, case studies, etc. Also like to thank a lot of technical people who have done a massive, impressive work with respect to the the editing as well as the recording part, and also to the people who have broadcasted it in live, and also all the people who the moment we see a technical glitch, it comes to our mind that what we are actually missing out, right? So typically, to make it seamless, I thank everyone, specifically the viewpoint that it's everybody's hard work that has actually materialized into that. And more than that, a special shout out to all the participants. You are simply amazing with respect to your involvement in the session. I have got some fabulous feedback, and that is testimony to the fact that you have enjoyed taking this course. And this is the first time this course has been floated, and this is something which is evidence to the fact that you have really enjoyed or thoroughly learned during the process of learning and development. So I hope that I could show justice to the particular course. Definitely all the references you can make use of as reading material, which we have already given as references. You can always go through. See, more you read, more perspectives you'll get and more ideas you'll get. That would be a better way to actually understand the subject or the discipline as such. So this is my request. So before concluding, what I remember is Meg J. Meg J is what I believe, if the name is correct, typically she is a psychologist and an associate professor at the University of Virginia, associate professor in the human resource development. So Meg J talks about having courageous conversations with oneself. So typically, I would recommend at this point in time when we conclude this course, because potentially this would be the last and final live session, to have a clear and courageous conversation with yourself. And it starts with prejudice. Are you prejudiced that you know everything? You don't have to go for any learning and development initiative that your organization or employer is suggesting? Just think about that, just introspect. Or do you think that you have to actually learn more? You have to actually develop. There are some areas for improvement. There are some, typical aspects which needs some improvement. That will be critical. Second would be the factor that you have to understand what typically is a, conversation that should move around empathy or empathy gap. So typically, let's say you understand that there is some individual in your organization who is struggling with respect to learning and development. Are you in a position to converse or talk about that and give him or her some confidence or idea? And also to include, is your conversation moving in the growth mindset aspect? So this three aspects, please let them stay with you. Think about it. Are you prejudiced when it comes to your learning and development? Are you having the right empathy to help people out in lifting others, specifically with respect to learning and development? And do you have a very favorable communication with yourself with respect to your mindset, especially a growth mindset? So that would be the parting thought or ending thought I would like to give you before I conclude. Thank you once again to for registering for this particular course and being part of this course. You have indeed made the learning experience a very fruitful one. At any point in time, if you want to have any discussion, please write to me. You know me, you know my credentials. Typically, you can write to me, interact with me wherever we can have collaborations. That is also possible. Please let me know. So otherwise, thank you once again for being part of this wonderful course and wish you all the very best for the upcoming exams. Thank you. Namaste.